as Hamas and Hezbollah are armed and then rearmed by Iran. Israel is under attack. The missiles may come and go, but when there are lulls, it is only because the enemy is planning terrorist attacks against civilian centers. Well, I wish he wasn't so. So I know where I draw the line. I draw it right here. I will not stand on the sidelines while the enemies of Israel threaten the right of Israel's citizens to live safely and exist in a Jewish state. I draw the line when bomb shelters must be built in playgrounds. I draw the line when buses must be searched for explosives before they enter the central bus station in Jerusalem. I draw the line when mothers worry about their children going to nightclubs in Tel Aviv because of the threat of terror. I draw the line when schools are closed not because of incoming snow, but because of incoming missiles. Today, the missiles fall on Sderot, but what if action isn't taken? How long until these missiles fall on Jerusalem, on Tel Aviv, on London, on New York? Appeasement is not a viable strategy to cope with an enemy who regards the entire Western world as their enemy, a fact that many of Israel's Western critics seem unable to grasp. We have 4 children, and broadly speaking, I think it's fair to say we raised them kind of the same way, same values, same traditions, same priorities, but 2 of them, Corey and Tara, were wired to be activists. And so Corey concludes, after all of this, I'd rather take the gun out of the terrorist's hands than preach to an American audience about why the terrorist is wrong. And so, off he went. Tara's journey began quite differently. Tara attended Schechter and Emanu-El, kindergarten through middle school. In 7th grade, she declared her intention to attend boarding school for high school. Mindy asked Tara if she remembered she was Jewish. In Europe, Jews may attend boarding school, but here in America, Jews go to summer camp. They go to high school. Tara went to Westtown, a Quaker boarding school in Westchester, Pennsylvania, about 25 miles west of Philadelphia. About 400 students, maybe 20 were Jewish, and maybe 6 of them actually cared. The boarding school environment is a bit like college. It tends to promote social justice and what we might broadly describe as liberal thinking. Westtown had a population of kids from very diverse racial, geographic, and socioeconomic backgrounds. With no history or context, these 15 to 18-year-olds see a strong military and startup nation tech-driven economy on the one side, who are occupying people who live in poverty, with high unemployment, and at least in the case of Gaza, permanent refugee status. On the other, they default to supporting the underdog, which is the Palestinians. Tara was never willing to be silent in the face of moral challenges. While she couldn't wait to get away from the daily prayer and blue curriculum of Schechter, she would not stand by and watch the Israel bashing and the associated anti-Semitism, assuming, of course, they weren't the same thing. She became a strong voice for equality for people of color, the LGBTQ+ community, and all minorities in challenging the establishment and white privilege. That means me, which is a whole different topic for another night. She also began reading and researching the history of Israel and the Middle East to combat the popular opinion in Westtown that Israel was the aggressor and occupier in the Arab-Israeli conflict. Westtown had a student exchange program with a Quaker school in Ramallah, a friend school in Ramallah. At the start of Tara's sophomore year, a freshman showed up, having left her home in Ramallah just a few days before. It seems the new student had been told that Tara, whose brother was currently serving in the IDF, hated Palestinians. When Tara heard this, she decided to go introduce herself to this new student and clear the air. I don't hate Palestinians, I hate terrorists, she said. We should be friends and set an example, show people that it's possible. And this fresh out of Ramallah 14-year-old wasn't interested. We don't need to be friends. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. That caught Tara a bit by surprise, but then the zinger, don't worry, Tara, I'm not going to hurt you on the Westtown campus. Fast forward to my conversation with Tara, in which I assured her she should not feel trapped there. If she felt unsafe or uncomfortable, we'd find her another place. Dad, if I leave, she says, who is going to educate these 400 people? And so she stayed. And that was the beginning of her journey. She did the work required to educate students, teachers, administrators, and board members. She even asked for and had a meeting with the president of the board of trustees at Westtown because she thought he was an outright anti-Semite. And the more she learned, the more she felt connected to Israel. In the middle of her junior year, she called home to tell us that she went home. Half a sentence. She planned to move to Israel after high school and enlist in the IDF.
So Andrew has given you some insight as to what led Corey and Tara to serve the IDF. Of course, we are very proud of them and their commitment. And then there's the other side of this. When we became parents, we knew that the most important things we could do for our babies was to love them and keep them safe. As I'm sure you all know, and Phil, you are learning, keeping them safe becomes a lot more difficult as babies grow into children and then into adults. When Corey began the process of making Aliyah and trying out for the elite units he wanted to join, we had two choices. We could support him or not support him. He was going to sign up either way. The only thing that would change if we didn't support him would be our relationship. We weren't willing to let anything get in the way of that. Ultimately, Corey served in a combat unit called Givati. He was based in the southern part of Israel on the border of Gaza. At one time during his service, he called to tell us that the commander was taking their phones, and he didn't know when he would speak with us again. For anyone here who doesn't know, when the IDF takes away the soldiers' phones, it's because those soldiers are going into enemy territory and don't want their location to be revealed through the phone GPS. So what do you say to your child in that moment? I can tell you now that I've had to do it more than once, and I still don't know the answer. I know I said I loved him, and I was proud of him. I'm sure I asked him to be careful, what Jewish mother wouldn't. And I'm certain I didn't cry until after I hung up with him. After a few days, I realized I was jumping every time the phone or the doorbell rang. I remember asking Andrew to please find out how the IDF would tell us if something, God forbid, happened to Corey. Long story short, I was then okay when the phone rang, but petrified of the door. Fortunately, he was only out of communication for a few days and never actually went into Gaza that time. After a little over 3 years, Corey finished his service, moved back to the United States, and I began to sleep again without the help of medication. In 2016, our youngest daughter, Tara, told us of her plan to move to Israel and join the IDF. As you've heard, though her reasons for doing so were different from Corey's, her passion, determination, and commitment were equally as strong. By then, we knew enough not to try to talk her out of it. Truth be told, I thought, well, at least she's a woman and won't be put into such dangerous situations. I should have known better. After several grueling tryouts, Tara was accepted into the OKETS unit, it's the Canine unit, which is the highest level of combat a woman can achieve in the IDF. She repeatedly went on middle-of-the-night raids into the West Bank, accompanying special force units like the one her brother had served in just a few years earlier. On these raids, she and her dog Giza were charged with finding guns and ammunition. Suffice it to say, they found many of each during the time she served. When Tara was finished, I was incredibly grateful that both of my children had served and both were alive and physically unharmed. Tara stayed in Israel and last fall began a dual-degree program from Columbia, whereby she attends Tel Aviv University for 2 years and Columbia for 2 years. Fast forward to October 7th, 2023. Our family, like everyone else, watched and listened in horror as the unfathomable stories of the Hamas massacre were revealed. Tara managed to get one of the last flights out that Saturday afternoon so that she would make it home in time for her brother Russell's wedding, which was exactly 1 week later. Tara's unit does not have reserve duty because they work with a specific dog during their service. Corey's unit was called up immediately, but he told them he couldn't come back until after he delivered his best man speech. During that week, I had many conversations with each of my children. The one that stands out right now is one that I had with Corey. I don't remember his exact words, but the gist of it was this: Mom, I have watched the videos of the barbaric and inhuman things Hamas did to our people. They must be punished for their actions, and I cannot stand by while it happens. I hope you understand. By the time their brother was married, both of my children knew people who had been killed, and both were determined to do what they could to help. On Sunday of the wedding weekend, we said goodbye to Tara. I waited until she was out of sight to break down. Monday afternoon, we brought Corey to the airport. I tried to think of something inspiring to say to my son, but my mind went completely blank. And then I realized I needed to ask him a question that no parent should ever have to ask their child. While we were hugging goodbye, I said, I need to ask you something. If anything happens, where do you want to be? I couldn't even bring myself to use the word, but he knew exactly what I meant. He said, wherever you want me to be. I begged him not to leave it up to me. He responded, it's enough that you're letting me go. You get to decide. I pulled back from our hug and said, I didn't know there was an option B to letting you go, or I definitely should. We hugged and cried a lot after that, until the ticket agent, who definitely wasn't Jewish, admonished Corey that he better stay safe and come back to his family. In the meantime, Tara got herself back into the army and was mostly on guard duty for kibbutzim in the south that had been evacuated. It was virtually unfathomable that we now had 2 children serving in the IDF during a war. Tara's service in this capacity lasted about a month and was fortunately uneventful. Corey, on the other hand, went directly to base and began training for what would ultimately be the incursion into Gaza. 2 weeks after he arrived, he called to tell us they were taking his phone. I remember saying to him, I've been expecting this call, and everything I wanted to say to you just went out of my head. He reassured me that over the course of his 35 years, we had said all that needed to be said for him to know exactly how I felt. He explained that no matter what happened, he was in the place he most wanted to be. He had never felt more certain of his purpose or more committed to carrying out his mission. All I could say was that I was proud and petrified, and to tell him how much I loved him. For what seemed like forever, we were out of communication with him. Fortunately, we were part of a WhatsApp group that his team created, and if we were lucky, we would get 2 or 3 messages a day saying, all good. Andrew and I began waking up several times throughout each night to check for those messages. After 11 days, his team was allowed out for 24 hours. Even though I cherished each of the calls and FaceTimes we had during those 24 hours, I couldn't help but count the hours until he went back in. A week later, Corey was out again, and we were able to speak. What we didn't know at the time was that he was out because he had been evacuated. An RPG hit the room that he was in, that's a rocket-propelled grenade, and he had been injured and taken to the hospital. Fortunately, his injuries were relatively minor, and he insisted on going back in as soon as possible after the incident. Last Wednesday morning, after about another 10-day stint, Corey's unit came out of Gaza again. When his debriefing sessions were over, he called and told us his unit was being replaced in Gaza, and he wouldn't go back in until likely sometime in the spring. I honestly didn't know how hard it had been to breathe until I heard those words. From the moment he went into Gaza, for the first time, I felt like I was walking around outside of my body. Time stood still, and getting through each day was like walking through quicksand. And yet, we did get through each day, one step at a time, and with the love and support of an amazing community of friends and family who held us up and continually prayed for our children. Although it is tempting to end on this note, I want to read a short excerpt from an email my husband recently wrote. Quote, just a brief sobering addendum here. There will be other soldiers rotated in to continue the same work that Corey and his team have been doing. Their families will surely pick up the worry right where ours leaves off. Let's redirect our prayers to those soldiers and their families and continue to pray for the safe and speedy return of the hostages. I thank you all for being here tonight. I thank you,